One of the cornerstones of Tennessee Court Talk is to educate our listeners about the court system. On today's episode, we are going to do just that and discuss retention elections in Tennessee. Recently, in August of 2024, Tennessee voters were asked to vote on judges with a simple yes or no vote. Many voters may have been confused by seeing a yes or no on a ballot and have questions. For example, who are these judges? How do they get on a ballot? And what court are we voting on? I'm your host, Nick Morgan, digital media lead for the Tennessee Administrative Office of the Courts. And on this episode, we are sitting down with a judge who recently went through a retention election successfully. Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeals Judge Matthew Wilson. Judge Wilson was appointed to the appellate court bench in 2023 after serving as an assistant United States attorney in the Western District. Judge Wilson, welcome to Tennessee Court Talk.
Thank you, Nick. It's great to be here.
Tennessee is one of 20 states that use retention elections. So I want to start with the basics for our listeners. As someone who didn't grow up in one of those 20 states, what is a retention election and why am I being asked to vote on judges?
Well, the Tennessee Constitution provides that judges shall be elected, and specifically judges, or we call them justices of the Supreme Court. The system was set up in place where since 2014, it was first implemented in 2016, the governor's office employs what's called the Governor's Council for Judicial Appointments. It's a panel made up of approximately 11 to 13 individuals from across the state. They make recommendations to the governor based on merit and their selection, and send typically 3 names to the governor's office. In my situation, Governor Lee received my name with 2 other individuals. Governor Lee selected me as his pick or selection, and I was at that point appointed by the governor. At that point, my name went before the Tennessee General Assembly, pursuant to now the Tennessee Constitution as amended 8 years ago. My name has to be voted on by the members of the Tennessee General Assembly, and a majority assembly members picked me and voted in favor of my judgeship. At that point, every approximately 8 years, the name of the appellate judge is put before the Tennessee voters pursuant to the Tennessee Constitution, and they either vote to retain or replace said judge.
And what judges are subject to retention elections? Like what types of judges?
It's the appellate courts and up, if that makes sense. So that would be the Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeals, member of the court I'm on, and then the Tennessee Court of Appeals, as well as the 5 Tennessee Supreme Court justices.
So how does voting yes or no for an appellate court judge differ from voting for a trial court judge per se?
Oftentimes, more often than not, circuit court, trial court level judges, as well as general sessions judges and chancellors, will have opponents, and that is somebody running in a political campaign against them. And the voters choose between 2 or more names. Oftentimes there's more than 2 in some of the larger counties. In my situation, in a retention election, it's just a simple yes or no. And Lord forbid, if I were selected not to be retained by the voters, then the process that I described earlier would start all over again, and the governor would nominate a new potential judge. The General Assembly would confirm that judge, and then they would serve.
What exactly is the job of an appellate judge?
An appellate judge, at least in my level of court, the Court of Criminal Appeals, we are an error-correcting court. That is, we review what happens at the trial level and see if the process that took place was actually legal, if it violated any constitutional provisions or statutory provisions from our laws, if the process was followed and somebody had a fair process below. We do not hear evidence. We do not have live witnesses. The vast majority of the time, the individual where we're deciding their case, they're not even present. Similarly, for the Court of Appeals, which handles the civil cases, they're reviewing the processes that took place at the civil trial level, and they're reviewing it for error. And then the Supreme Court has a slightly different function, but they would review what my court does in the Court of Appeals, and they also have the specific duty to interpret and set the Tennessee as well as the United States Constitution.
You mentioned earlier that appellate court judges are retained for 8 years, but I want to ask about your situation a little bit more specifically. You were appointed in 2023, but you were already up for retention in 2024. Can you explain why?
While I am very grateful to be here, my circumstances of being placed on the court are a little bit sad. Judge John Everett Williams, a long-serving presiding judge of the Court of Criminal Appeals, unfortunately passed away just a few days into his term in 2022. He was just, along with the other judges on my court, overwhelmingly elected and retained by the voters and passed away on Labor Day weekend of 2022. The process is that because he had just begun a full 8-year term, when my name was advanced and I was confirmed by the General Assembly, I was to serve out the remainder of his term. But also the process requires that on the next immediate statewide ballot, and that would be in 2024, my name would go before the voters to either retain or replace. Similarly, Justice Dwight Tarwater went through the process with me at the General Assembly and began his term on September 1st of 2023, and he had even a shorter time before he went before the voters in August of this year.
During an election cycle, citizens often see signs posted in yards and billboards campaigning for your vote. Why do we not see that with a retention vote?
Well, I'm sure you could. In 2014, there was actually an organized campaign to replace 3 sitting Supreme Court justices, where political organizations were formed to seek that they be removed from the bench. That hasn't happened since. I imagine if we saw that take place again, if there were an organized campaign against the appellate judges, perhaps you would see signs and campaigning and advertisement. But at this point, I would like to think that as the voters consider us, that is the appellate court judges, for retention, that they would look at the merits of our work. Our opinions are published on the Tennessee Administrative Office of the Court's website. It's for the world to see. I would like to believe that voters would look at our track record by reviewing our opinions, seeing whether they agree with them, if we've done our job and done it well, and make their decisions based on that.
Since you were just recently on the ballot for retention in August, what was the feeling like going into a statewide election where, you weren't campaigning and people may not know you or even your profession?
Well, it was a little nerve-wracking because I've never been a politician before, and I guess by virtue of my name being on the recent ballot, I'm now a politician in the sense that I'm politically retained. It was the uncertainty of it. But I'm grateful that 395,000 of my closest friends across Tennessee saw fit to keep me in office. I tried to spread the word locally and from the county where I was raised near Nashville, and I'm sure the word got out through their associations with me, and knowing my relatives. But basically, you're right that nobody in East Tennessee likely has ever heard my name unless they do their independent research and see the body of my work.
In order to win a retention vote, what percentage do you have to have?
50% plus 1, and that 1 is very important. Luckily, I had a higher margin than that, and so did Justice Tarwater. I believe we were both in the over 70%, so we're very thankful for that.
Speaking of you more specifically, you came to the appellate bench after being an assistant United States Attorney General, not a trial judge or in local practice. Can you explain that job and what types of cases you were arguing?
Sure. An assistant United States attorney is a federal prosecutor. So we are tasked with enforcing and prosecuting federal laws, which are just like state laws, and that it's just a different courthouse. The types of cases that I handled, I started out just with a general caseload, and I also handled forfeiture matters, which are civil and criminal in nature, both types of cases. And then I began prosecuting drug cases, which unfortunately in our society, drugs are a major problem and very prevalent. So I prosecuted drug cases for several years. For about the last 8 to 9 years of my practice with the United States Attorney's Office here in Jackson, I prosecuted the white-collar crimes, that is bank fraud, healthcare fraud, different crimes that involve money. Basically, that's the best way to describe white-collar prosecution. I also had a substantial appellate practice, and that is where the United States Attorney's Office differs from our state system, and I'm very grateful for that. The United States Attorney's Office, we do prosecute the cases at the trial level, go before a judge and a jury, and if that person is convicted of a crime, then the next job is to take that case and defend it. So you're prosecuting below and you're defending the conviction past that, because we defend it at the Federal Court of Appeals. Here in Tennessee, that is the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, which sits in Cincinnati, Ohio, and encompasses several states, including Tennessee. So I had a substantial appellate practice through my job, had more than 70 matters that went before the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, and through that appellate work, it really grew this love for what I'm doing now. So I had the benefit of doing both trial work and appellate work at the same time, and luckily was able to gain substantial experience through that.
You mentioned growing up outside of Nashville. Can you just explain your background a little bit? How do you get a job as an assistant United States Attorney General?
Okay, well, I had a little roundabout, circuitous route, but wanted to get a little bit far away for college after growing up near Nashville, and I went to a local high school there called Montgomery Bell Academy. I decided to go to Auburn University for college, and when I went to Auburn, I met my wife, who's from Florida, and went to law school in Florida at Florida State University with the intentions of coming home eventually. When you go to school in a certain state, your first job is normally local because that's where the connections are. So I worked for a short time in Florida as a state prosecutor. And in 2008, I had the opportunity because I thought I was good at my job, and apparently the people who hired me thought I was too, because I was selected as a assistant United States attorney, a federal prosecutor, and made my way back to Jackson, for where I've been about the last 15 years.
I want to switch gears a little bit as a way for our listeners who just saw your name on a ballot, actually. I have 5 lightning round questions for you. You ready?
Sure.
What is a recent memorable meal?
Well, what red-blooded American doesn't love a steak? So I am a strip steak guy normally, so I would say a strip steak medium rare with a substantial side salad, ranch dressing, and who doesn't love a loaded baked potato?
Oh, absolutely. What picture is currently on your phone's home screen?
My family. I love my family. I've been married to my wife for 21 years, and God has blessed me with 3, I would call them beautiful, but they're handsome young men, my sons, as well as we have another young man that we care for.
What 3 words would your best friend use to describe you?
Well, a friend of mine described me as very serious. I like to think I have a sense of humor, but I guess it doesn't always portray that way. But I would say serious, loyal, and subtly funny.
What is one hobby that you do to relax outside of work?
Having 3 sons, we are very involved in the outdoors. I love being outside in God's creation. I love to hunt. I love to fish. We're in a great state for that, where there's lots of opportunities. It's not really about catching any fish or harvesting any animals. It's just being out in the outdoors. So that is my relaxation time and when I feel closest to my Creator.
Appellate judges travel all over the state hearing cases. It's just you in the car after a long day in court. What artist or music genre are you riding home to?
I'm big into podcasts. It depends on the flavor of the week. Oftentimes I stay away from the crime thrillers or the mysteries because I read about those things every day. So oftentimes it's just the grab bag of whatever's coming up on the Apple Podcasts. I also like history, and I recently listened to an audio book on it was called The History of Christianity. It was very interesting, the history of the Christian church. I enjoy history and I enjoy podcasts.
Judge Wilson, congratulations on your successful yes vote. It's been a pleasure to sit down with you today. Thank you for your time on Tennessee Court Talk.
Thank you, Nick.
To learn more about the Tennessee court system and to read opinions, visit tncourts.gov and listen to more episodes of Tennessee Court Talk on all major podcast platforms.